You know, usually when we pick up a book or just immerse ourselves in a story, we treat it like a vacation for the mind.
Right, like an escape hatch.
Exactly. We step out of our own messy lives for a minute, leave the real world behind, and just exist somewhere else. But um, what if we have that completely backward?
I mean, it's a wild thought.
It is. What if the stories we consume aren't escapes from reality at all, but like the actual blueprints we use to construct it?
That completely upends the dynamic between a reader and a text, you
Yeah.
know? Because if you look at it that way, you are no longer a passive audience member just sitting in the dark consuming entertainment.
Yeah, you're on the clock.
Exactly. You are on a job site,
Yeah.
actively gathering the raw materials, the scaffolding, to build your own worldview.
Which is really the core mission of today's deep dive. You, the listener, have handed us this incredibly rich stack of fantasy and philosophical texts. And we're going to extract some pretty profound lessons from them about the nature of truth, the architecture of our own minds, and how narratives shape the lives we live.
And we're going to focus heavily on two specific anchors in these sources today.
Right, the journal and the sermon.
Yes, a worn, passed-down journal that acts as a sort of manual for human suffering, and a mesmerizing sermon by an abbess that, honestly, completely dismantles our modern understanding of inner peace.
It really does. It's a remarkable collection because it uses the framework of myth. These seemingly distant, fantastical settings, not to pull us away from the real world, but to force us into a corner with the most uncomfortable truths about our own psychology.
It strips away all our modern defenses.
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
Because before we can even touch how these stories apply to our inner lives, we have to establish what truth actually means in the context of narrative.
Right, because we tend to think of truth as binary, like it either happened exactly like this or it's a lie.
Exactly. But in the sources, there's this fascinating debate that attacks that exact idea. We meet a master archivist named Legati and his young scribe, Idril.
And Idril is having a full-blown crisis over these historical tablets.
A total meltdown. He's looking at tablets detailing how a specific warlord died, and they all contradict each other. One claims he died on a road, another says a woman in a tower killed him, and a third insists he literally just vanished into thin air.
Which is so frustrating for someone in his position.
Right. Idril is desperate to find the single objective timeline so he can record the quote-unquote true history.
Idril really represents our very modern, almost algorithmic obsession with data. Like, we equate truth strictly with objective coordinates.
The facts and only the facts.
Exactly. We want the timestamp, the GPS location, the exact sequence of events. And if there is a contradiction, we assume there's a failure in the system.
But Legati refuses to give him that validation. He tells Idril that, he doesn't get to decide what is true. The story decides. He says, narrative is a living creature.
Such a great line.
And then he delivers this absolute gut punch of a quote. He says, accuracy is a candle. Usefulness is the sun.
What's fascinating here is that this is a staggering distinction, especially coming from an archivist whose entire profession is ostensibly built on preserving the past.
Right. His whole job is accuracy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Legati is suggesting that absolute sterile accuracy is actually a low-level form of truth. It illuminates a very small, specific area like a candle. But usefulness, the emotional resonance, the moral instruction, the warning that is the sun, it illuminates the entire human condition.
I have to admit, my initial reaction to that was a bit of pushback.
Really? How so?
Well, because isn't accuracy the fundamental baseline of history? Like, if you're fudging the timeline, you're just writing fiction, right?
I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, because a perfectly accurate encyclopedia entry gives you the exact dates, the exact trip movements, it's safe. But then I realized an encyclopedia entry doesn't make you weep.
No, it definitely doesn't.
It doesn't make you reconsider your own mortality. A great novel, even if it alters a timeline, gives you the visceral feeling of what it was like to be alive in the terror or joy of that moment.
Right. Legati actually warns Idril that a perfect record can become a cage.
Yes, a cage.
Legati's asserting that contradictions are not errors to be erased. They are gifts. They are the cracks in the historical record where human revelation slips through.
Oh, I love that.
Because when you see 3 different accounts of a warlord's death, you aren't just seeing bad record keeping. You're seeing where human memory hesitates, where the trauma or the myth of the event was so massive that a single perspective just couldn't contain it.
So if you build the cage of sterile facts, you trap the event.
Exactly. The story, with all its contradictions, is a door. It invites you to walk through and discover the higher truth for yourself.
That reframing completely changes how we interact with information. And it aligns with another character in your sources, the storyteller Sean
Oh,
Chai.
Shanchai is fantastic.
He observes that truth isn't some monolith that you can dig up, possess, and just lock in a vault. He describes it as a complex chorus.
Right. It only emerges between people.
Yes, existing in the tension and the harmony of shared narratives.
Shanchai operates on the understanding that words are architectural. Like, to name a thing is to construct its reality.
Think about human psychology for a second.
Yeah.
Before you have a specific word for a complex emotion, say, the bittersweet grief of watching your child grow older, you can barely process the feeling. It's just a vague ache.
Oh, absolutely.
But the moment a story names it, it crystallizes. It becomes a tangible part of your psychological territory. We are not passive receivers of reality. Through the stories we tell, we are actively weaving the environment we inhabit.
Which is such a powerful thought.
So if external narratives are these living creatures that literally build our reality, it forces a much more intimate, slightly terrifying question.
What about the internal stories?
Exactly. If we are the architects, how do we manage the chaotic, constantly contradicting narrative running on a loop inside our own heads?
And that is the pivotal pivot of these texts. The macro philosophy of historical truth folds inward into the micro reality of human consciousness.
The real battlefield.
Right. The kingdom we're really trying to conquer and understand isn't out there on a map. It's the landscape behind our own eyes.
Which leads us to a deeply moving, quiet anchor in these sources. The physical embodiment of this internal struggle is a simple, worn journal.
Such a beautiful motif.
We first see it in the hands of a young woman named Maria, and she is pacing in an abbey courtyard, consumed by anguish, terrified for her friends, just aching for some kind of certainty in a dark period of her life.
And then Sister Anwin comes out.
Yes, this older nun comes out and hands her this book. It's not a spell book. It's not a magic artifact. It's just a collection of reflections passed down from another sister.
It serves as a generational manual for psychological survival. And what makes it so powerful is that it doesn't offer a cure,
Oh, no, not at all.
It offers solidarity.
The very first page sets the tone instantly. It says, I hope you heal from the things you don't speak about.
Oh, wow. It's a profound acknowledgement of the invisible narratives we all carry. The stories we are too ashamed or just too frightened to verbalize.
And notice how this journal travels. The author didn't just write it for Maria.
Right, it gets passed along.
Later in the text, we see a highly disciplined, stoic warrior named Eleanor give this exact same journal to a man named Jack.
And Jack is in a really bad place.
He has survived something horrific in some ancient ruins, and his coping mechanism is just complete withdrawal. He is burying the trauma under relentless work, basically trying to outrun his internal monologue.
And Eleanor actually reads a passage aloud to him that I think, honestly, everyone listening can relate to.
Oh, for sure.
The journal warns, the mind is a wild terrain, prone to wandering into the thickets of distraction, anxiety, and impulsivity.
It doesn't tell him to conquer it, though.
No. It advises that taming these thoughts demands conscious, patient effort. It's about the microscopic choice, made 100 times a day, to observe your thoughts without instantly reacting to them.
It fundamentally rejects the idea that you can overpower your own psychology through sheer force of will. Like, you cannot command a trauma response or a panic attack to simply vanish just because it's inconvenient.
You really can.
I always used to picture the mind like a backyard garden, but reading this, I realize that's way too simple.
Because a garden implies control.
Right. A garden implies you have total domain over it. The mind is more like a delicate, enclosed terrarium or a wild ecosystem. Can't just stand on the edge and scream at the weeds to die.
And if you go in and violently rip out an invasive species, you might destroy the soil and collapse the whole biome.
Yes. Managing it means getting your hands in the dirt. It's the incredibly unglamorous daily work of pulling one weed at a time and consciously planting the seeds you want.
Exactly.
And let's be honest, sometimes my ecosystem is producing nothing but anxiety weeds and replaying a wildly embarrassing thing I said at a party in 2014 at 3 in the morning.
Oh, we've all been there.
Yeah.
And that late-night anxiety loop is exactly what the Elven glossary in your sources categorizes under the term Noreon way.
Right. That concept fascinated me. How does the text define it again?
So Nurianwe translates roughly to profound truth or true being, but it's heavily contextualized around spiritual humility.
Okay.
It is the solemnity of genuine self-reflection. It's the ability to look at your own terrarium, to see the invasive weeds, your unintentional cruelty, your deepest insecurities, and accept absolute personal accountability for them without letting that realization destroy your self-worth.
That is such a fine line to walk.
It is. It's the difference between self-awareness and self-loathing. You are acknowledging the faults to cultivate growth, not to salt the earth.
So it's looking at the ugliest parts of yourself without blinking, but also without condemning the whole ecosystem.
Exactly.
But if we manage to do that, if we put in the daily maintenance to observe this wild terrain with humility, what are we actually cultivating it for? Like, what is the ultimate destination of this inner journey?
Well, that question directs us to the second major anchor of our deep dive, the Abbess's sermon.
This scene is a masterclass in challenging expectations.
It really sets the stage.
The abbess steps before her congregation in the sanctuary. The air is heavy, completely still, lit only by the warm glow of oil lamps. She commands the room with this serene authority, and she begins speaking about the kingdom of God. But before anyone can picture clouds or pearly gates, she shatters the cliché.
She doesn't let them sit in that comfort.
No. She says it is no distant throne. It's not a city of gold waiting for you after you die. It is, quote, close as the air that fills your lungs, hidden right there in the silent chambers of your own soul.
She effectively moves the ultimate spiritual destination from a distant, external future to an immediate internal present.
Which is huge.
And to illustrate the architecture of this inner kingdom, she delivers a psychological deconstruction of several classic parables. But she doesn't treat them as moral checklists. She treats them as ecological laws of the soul.
The way she groups these ideas together is brilliant. Let's look at how she tackles the concept of invisible labor. She weaves together the parables of the sower, the small seed, and the yeast. For the sower, she says the divine spark is already inside you, but emptiness unveils abundance. Your heart has to be cleared of its hardness and its constant anxieties to actually receive the seed.
It's the principle that you cannot pour water into a cup that is already overflowing with pride and distraction.
Exactly.
But the small seed and the yeast take it further. They reject our modern demand for grand spectacles of self-improvement.
Yes, we all want the dramatic montage where we suddenly become a perfect person.
With the sweeping background music.
Exactly. But she says greatness is hidden in littleness. The yeast does its work invisibly from within. You have to trust the hidden leaven.
The dough is rising even when you can't see it moving.
True transformation is entirely unglamorous.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, she then pivots to a concept that challenges almost every modern self-help philosophy we have. She tackles the parable of the wheat and the weeds.
Oh, wait, this is the one that really threw me.
It's challenging.
Because she says that in the field of your soul, the wheat and the weeds grow together. And instead of tearing the weeds out immediately, God whispers like, wait, let them grow side by side. Do not despair when you see your own darkness tangling with your light.
Right.
I mean, on its face, that sounds insane. If I identify a toxic trait in myself, a weed, every instinct, every self-help book tells me to eradicate it right now. Why on earth would we wait?
Because if we look at this through the lens of Norianwe, that profound, humble truth, we have to admit that we often lack the wisdom to tell the difference. The abbess is warning against the violence of absolute purity.
The violence of purity. Wow.
Our flaws and our strengths frequently share the exact same root system.
So my fierce loyalty might be growing from the exact same soil as my deep-seated fear of abandonment.
Precisely. Or your capacity to fiercely protect the people you love might be tangled up in your anger. If you violently rip out the anger the moment you spot it, you might sever the roots of your protectiveness.
You destroy the wheat with the weed.
Yes. The abbess argues that true purity isn't the sterile absence of flaws. Purity is wholeness of heart. It is the patience to let your inner ecology mature until you have the wisdom to safely untangle what is fleeting from what is eternal.
That makes the final two parables she discusses, the pearl and the net, make total sense.
It brings it all together.
The pearl represents that wholeness, the undivided one. Once you achieve that patience, you gladly discard whatever causes you to stumble.
And the net.
She says the net is thrown into the open waters and gathers everything, good and bad alike. She tells them not to fear what is drawn up from their own dark waters because mercy recognizes the tangles in all of us.
It is a philosophy of radical integration. The hidden kingdom she's describing isn't a pristine, manicured lawn. It weaves together all our messy, contradictory, brilliant, and broken parts. She tells the novices that these parables aren't about a world to come. They are the treasure buried in your heart right this second.
We have covered so much ground here. We've moved from the idea that historical narratives are living blueprints to the intimate work of managing the terrarium of our own minds, all the way to this profound realization that our darkest weeds and brightest wheat are tangled together in the silent chambers of our soul.
It's a huge journey.
So, what does this all mean? We have to ask. What is the ultimate responsibility of the person consuming these stories? If you are listening to this right now, what is required of you?
Well, the sources do not let the audience off the hook. There is a chilling, beautiful realization presented in the text. Knowing is the first betrayal of any good secret. Reading makes you accountable.
Oh man, you are no longer just a witness standing on the sidelines. The moment you ingest the narrative, you become a participant.
The text posits that the reader or the listener is the final stabilizing witness.
Ugh.
A story is just dormant potential until it meets human attention. It remains incomplete without your interpretation.
The anchor that makes the story real isn't inside the book. The anchor is you.
Exactly. Which brings us to the ultimate quote from your sources. It perfectly encapsulates everything we've talked about today. It says, "Every book that ever tore you apart was only trying to hand you the thread so you could stitch yourself back together differently."
That is just a stunning summation.
Right. The discomfort you feel when a story challenges you, the contradictions that Ligotti talked about, the emotional weight of Maria's journal, they aren't there to break you down and leave you in pieces.
No.
They are raw materials. They are the threads you use to reconstruct your worldview into something more resilient.
It's the physical manifestation of one last elven concept from the lore, Nessanare.
Ah, yes.
It's described as the transformative process of personal growth that only happens when you fearlessly embrace uncomfortable truths. The glossary compares it to a lotus flower.
Such a perfect metaphor.
We all marvel at the beauty of the bloom, but we forget that the lotus only exists because it pushes its way up through murky, suffocating mud. You don't get the bloom without the mud.
And you don't get the wheat without the weeds.
Exactly, and you don't achieve that profound inner truth without the courage to look at your own flaws and say, I will use this to flourish.
It really shifts the burden of reality building directly onto our shoulders. We are the architects, and the stories we consume are the materials.
This has been an incredible journey through the sources you provided. We've seen how stories prioritize the sun of usefulness over the candle of accuracy. We've learned from a passed-down journal that taming our minds requires the patient, unglamorous work of tending an ecosystem.
And the abbess showed us that true inner peace isn't about eradicating our darkness.
No, it's about having the wholeness of heart to let it grow alongside our light until we are wise enough to untangle them. Which leaves us with a final thought to take with you as we close out this deep dive.
What's that?
Well, Shanchaya the storyteller reminds us that the deepest secret is that a story is never actually finished. Every listener eventually becomes a teller. Every ending you read becomes the beginning of your next chapter.
I love that.
But I want to push that one step further. If the stories we actively consume and engage with are the blueprints that build our reality, what about the stories we actively avoid?
Well, that's a great question.
If knowing is betrayal and reading makes you accountable, what does purposeful ignorance build? As you step out of this deep dive and back into the wild terrain of your own life, consider the blind spots in your terrarium. What happens to the ecosystem when you refuse to look at the shadows? The spaces between your certainties are waiting to be written. The question is, are you brave enough to read them?